Hello, I am Debbie McKeever, founder and owner of Strong and Healthy Temple. Welcome to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my series on mastering your mind during the wilderness season. This is the series finale. I will be wrapping it up with part 11, and in this part I'll be talking about Saul of Tarsus from the New Testament. And if you're a reader of the New Testament, and maybe you're not an avid reader of the New Testament, you might be wondering, who is Saul of Tarsus? You might know him better as Paul the Apostle. And that brings me to my point. This is the type of transformation and manifestation that most of us long for. I'll call it the road to Damascus type transformation, where it is almost instantaneous. Like, we do not want to go through the long wilderness season. As human beings, we want the fast track. We don't want the 40 days in the wilderness. We definitely don't want the 40 years. You know, we want it to happen, and we want it to happen now. And this was Paul's experience. And this is a prime example of, you know, sometimes when we're looking at certain people and we feel like, oh, you know, I've been in this for so long, and, you know, such and such just came over to this circle or this type of belief, and they're already manifesting you know, better things than me. Like if you're part of any type of manifestation circle or law of attraction type circles, things like that, and you may be still manifesting like free parking spaces or cups of coffee, and all of a sudden here comes this new person that comes along, and they've manifested like a house cash. You know, they're new to it, but they manifest quickly, and you're trying to wonder, like, how did they manifest so quickly? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the same fire that Saul of Tarsus had when he was persecuting Christians, God used that same fire for him to preach the gospel of Christ. So he was already on fire. He was just on fire for the wrong thing. And so it's where you are in your mindset, where you are in your beliefs. And so that new person who came along to your manifestation circle, you know, their mind was more pure, they were more open, and they were more ready to believe. Whereas you're in that mindset where you really haven't been built up yet. Like, you're still trying to convince yourself, like you think you've reached a certain level, but really you still think that faith is, you know, wishing and hoping, and, you know, you're still at the point that you're trying to make things happen, and you're really trying to convince yourself, and that's why you keep manifesting like these small things. That's why your transformation is taking so long, because you're still being built up. Remember how I talked about in part 1 how, you know, the dry season, the drought in your life, what it's there for is to build your faith, to build your belief, to transform your mind. So it's taking a little longer than you want it to, whereas a person who might be new to it, they're more open to it, and, you know, they're manifesting much quicker. And sometimes it's frustrating to see that, as I'm sure that it was probably, you know, frustrating for, you know, people during Paul's time who saw him, you know, make the manifestation so quickly. So I'll give you the backstory on that. Again, he was Saul of Tarsus, you know, at this time, and he was the Christian slayer. He had just consented to the martyr Stephen's death. And, you know, he was breathing out murderous threats against all of Christ's disciples, and he was literally like entering the private homes of Christians and dragging them out, women and children included, dragging them out, throwing them into prison. He was adamant that this Christ stuff was, you know, just a bunch of baloney, and so he was on fire for his cause, you know, and his cause was to persecute Christians. So one particular day, he was on his way to Damascus, and he was planning on putting all these Christians in chains, and he was going to drag them back to Jerusalem and put them all in prison for believing in this, this so-called Christ, because, he just wasn't having any part of that type of belief. So on his way to Damascus, he and his men, all of a sudden, he is enveloped by this extremely bright light, and he falls off of his horse, and he hears this voice, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And the voice, of course, is the voice of Christ. And because Paul asked who it was, and he told him. And Paul, long story short, Paul is converted on this day. The men, they hear the voice, but they don't see anything, and so they know that something is going on. And so all of a sudden, Paul is blind. He can't see. And so they had after his conversion and he became blind, they had taken him to the home of some believers, and he was there for 3 days, and he was without food and water for those 3 days that he was there. And God had conditioned the heart of a man named Ananias to go and anoint Paul to be one of his disciples, to go out and teach the gospel. So now this man that had been a Christian persecutor and a Christian slayer was now going to be preaching the gospel. And so Ananias, of course, was afraid of him because, he knew Saul's reputation. So anyway, he was obedient to God, and God told Ananias that he had already conditioned Paul's heart. And so he went over, and these things like scales ended up falling off of Saul's eyes. And so I want to pause right there and say that that is symbolic of what happens to us in our transformation process. These scales represent, now instead of seeing with our physical eyes and discerning things with our natural senses, now we're able to see and discern things with our spiritual senses. And so the scales were representative of Saul's conversion to Paul. And so now here he was, ready to preach the gospel of Christ, because God had said that he was going to take all of that fire that Paul had when he was persecuting Christians, and he was going to use it for his good. And that's what can happen to us, is that God can take wherever we are, and because sometimes we get ashamed of what we are and who we are and what we believe, but he can take what's in us now and develop that. And so that's what happens when you're in your wilderness experience. Even though most of us we want that Damascus experience, we want it to be quick, fast, and in a hurry, but we more than likely need further developing than what Paul needed. Paul was a person that was already fully developed, just for the wrong thing. And so our duration in the wilderness depends on our development. So God is taking those, taking our attributes and building up whatever attributes we have for the good of wherever he's taking us, whatever your destination is, or whatever it is that you're desiring and believing for and being prepared for. Those attributes are being built up and changed and transformed. And so once those scales fall off, then we're ready for the complete surrender, and we're ready to go out. And like Paul went out, he was ready to go out at that point and teach the gospel of Christ, versus persecuting Christians. And so of course he got with the other disciples, and God ended up sending him and a man by the name of Barnabas out to preach the gospel. And if you're familiar with the New Testament, that most Bible believing Christians consider Paul, like the greatest apostle of all times. 2/3 of the New Testament is attributed to him. You almost hear nothing of the majority of the other disciples after the book of Acts, with the exception of Peter and John. So that God had done like a great work in this man's life. And the same way that God did that for Paul, who was Saul, the Christian persecutor at that time, he can do that for you. So it really doesn't matter where you're at right now. God can take wherever you're at and put you in the place where you need to be, but you just have to be obedient and follow the instructions and be just as on fire with your beliefs as you were with your unbeliefs. So the same way that Paul didn't believe in the gospel and he didn't believe in Christ, all of a sudden he was on fire for it. So for the same way that you might believe this and that is not possible for me. It's not possible for me to have my dream career. It's not possible for me to be rich. Whatever it is, like when you really think about it, deep down inside, you're on fire for your doubts. So when you become on fire for your faith, the same way that you're on fire for your doubts, then you'll have that road to Damascus experience. It might seem long right now, like you might feel like the children of Israel, where you feel like you've been dwelling forever, but once you become on fire for the faith, like you're on fire for all of your disbelief, then you'll have that road to Damascus experience where the scales fall off. And so anyway, that is a wrap for that, and again, a wrap for this series. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I truly hope that you have enjoyed it and found some value in it. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Please share the video with your network. Subscribe to the videos. Hit the bell icon to receive notifications of when I release new videos. Again, thank you so much for watching, and make it a fantastic day.